The moment I stepped through the door, I heard vicious cursing echoing from the living room. Eat. Hurry up and eat. This dog food costs more than anything you've eaten in your entire life. Don't be ungrateful. My heart tightened. I rushed into the living room, and the scene before me made my blood boil. My father-in-law, who had just undergone heart bypass surgery, was curled up on the cold floor, his face deathly pale. The butler my wife Isabel had hired at great expense, Marcus Snow, was wearing my clothes, one foot pressing down on my father-in-law's shoulder, holding a reeking dog bowl, and forcefully shoving it at the old man's mouth. Marcus, are you insane? I immediately rushed over and knocked the dog bowl out of his hands. The foul smell dog food splattered all over him. Marcus jumped up in rage, pointing at my nose and cursing. What's your problem? How dare you splash me? He brushed at the stains on his clothes with disgust, and glanced contemptuously at my father-in-law, collapsed on the floor. I was just teaching this old country bumpkin some manners. Your wife said. I'm in charge of this house. These crude country folk are full of bad habits. Letting him eat dog food is already doing him a huge favor. His face was full of contempt, without a shred of guilt. In fact, he seemed to think his actions were perfectly justified. I trembled with rage, my nails digging into my palms. My father-in-law was Victor Sterling, one of the top financial powers in the capital, and Isabel's biological father. Normally, Isabel didn't even dare breathe loudly in front of him. Now he was being stepped on and force-fed dog food by a butler. I was about to explain my father-in-law's identity, when Marcus sneered and kicked him hard in the chest. Stop pretending you haven't finished mopping the floor. His face instantly turned from white to purple. Victor. I threw myself forward and grabbed hold of my father-in-law. I frantically searched his pockets for his emergency heart pills. Marcus grabbed my hair and yanked me backward. Stop putting on this sob story for me. You country people love drama. Trying to scam us, are you? Shut up. If something happens to him, even Isabel can't save you. Marcus held his rapidly swelling cheek, his eyes turning venomous. How dare you, you worthless freeloader. Guards, throw these two beggars out. Burly bodyguards immediately rushed in from outside. Let go of me. Are you blind? Look carefully at who he is. I struggled desperately, but the bodyguards pinned me to the ground on both sides. Mr. Mitchell, Miss Sterling, instructed us that all household rules follow Mr. Snow's orders. They roughly hauled up my ailing father-in-law. You'll regret this when Isabel comes back and sees how you treated him. She'll make you wish you were dead. I screamed in despair. Marcus walked up to me and ground the pointed toe of his leather shoe into the back of my hand. Mitchell, do you really think you're some kind of wealthy son-in-law? Isabel already told me you're just a useless waste taking up space. Once I fully gain Isabel's trust, you and your poor old man will both be sent back to the countryside to farm. Drag this old bastard to the outdoor pool. Today I'll teach you both a lesson on behalf of Miss Sterling. Touch him and see what happens. I'll fight you all today. I broke free from the bodyguard's grip and bit down hard on the head bodyguard's wrist. My mouth hit the edge of the coffee table, blood seeping from the corner of my lips. What are you waiting for? Lock these two paupers in the backyard. No one opens that door without my permission. Marcus shrieked furiously. The two bodyguards stopped being polite. They dragged and hauled me and my father-in-law to the outdoor pool in the backyard. Nathan, my chest hurt so much. I hurriedly stripped off my down jacket and wrapped it tightly around my father-in-law. Victor, hang on. I'll call an ambulance right away. I fumbled with trembling hands for the phone in my pocket. It was empty. Through the transparent glass door, Marcus was smugly waving. My phone. Want your phone? Beg me, Nathan. Where's that backbone you had when you hit me? Didn't you say Isabel would kill me when she got back? Like to see who freezes to death tonight? I rushed to the glass door and pounded on the frame. Marcus, please. I'm begging you, give me the phone. My father-in-law really has heart disease. He'll die. Marcus leisurely peeled an imported cherry and popped it in his mouth. Disease? Pretty convincing act. You old bastards from the sticks are tougher than cockroaches. One night in the cold won't kill you. Victor, wake up. I completely broke down. I turned to the intercom and screamed, Marcus. The medicine is in the black bag on the living room sofa. Give me the medicine. Whatever you want. I'll agree to it. Marcus paused for a moment, walked to the sofa, pulled out the black bag and took out a white medicine bottle. Well, there really is medicine. His lips curling into a malicious smile. If you want the medicine, it's not impossible. Kneel down now and shout, I'm a country bumpkin. 3 times. Then I'll slide the medicine through the door crack. I looked at my dying father-in-law. Without any hesitation, I dropped to my knees on the freezing tiles. Bang! Bang bang! I'm a country bumpkin. I'm a country bumpkin. I'm a country bumpkin. I shouted at the top of my lungs. Can you give me the medicine now? I stared hopefully at the medicine bottle in Marcus's hand. But Marcus suddenly clutched his stomach and burst out laughing. Nathan, you really are an obedient dog. Too bad I suddenly changed my mind. Right in front of me, he unscrewed the cap of the medicine bottle. He poured the entire bottle of life-saving emergency heart pills into the nearby trash can. Oop, my hand slipped. You country people are tough. You can survive a night in the cold, right? Isabel, you're finally back. Nathan's poor father brought an infectious disease and even hit me. The door suddenly burst open. Isabel walked in, bringing a blast of cold air with her. Marcus immediately dropped his arrogant expression, covering his swollen cheek. He hurried forward. I just asked his father to take a bath. And his father? Forget it. I shouldn't have meddled. After all, I'm just a butler. Getting hit is my own fault. I frantically pounded on the glass door. Isabel, open the door. Save Victor. He's having a heart attack. But the glass was covered with thick frost. She couldn't see the figure outside at all, looking at Marcus with distress in her eyes. What happened? Who hit you? Marcus lowered his eyes, his voice hoarse. It's nothing, Isabel. Really nothing. Just broke the skin a little. Not worth getting upset over. Isabel's expression instantly darkened. I turned toward the backyard, her gaze as cold as a poison blade. Nathan, I usually tolerate you out of marital consideration, but you actually brought your poor father here to cause trouble. And you dared? To hurt Marcus? I shook my head frantically. Isabel, are you blind? That's not my father. That's your real father, Victor Sterling. He just had heart surgery. He's dying. Please open the door. Isabel laughed mockingly, as if she'd heard the joke of the century. She pressed the intercom, her voice dripping with disdain. Nathan, if you're going to lie, at least make it believable. My father is recuperating in Switzerland. How could he possibly appear here dressed like a beggar? Protect your poor father. You tell such a lie. You disgust me. She turned to the bodyguards behind her, her tone ice cold. Open the door. But Isabel's next words plunged me into hell. Throw these two paupers into the snow outside. Don't let their poverty stink up my carpet. The bodyguards immediately opened the door. They roughly grabbed my arms and dragged me and my father-in-law toward the front door. No, Isabel. You can't do this. I clung desperately to the door frame. If you throw him out today, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Isabel held Marcus close, looking down at me. The biggest regret of my life was marrying you. This disgraceful countryman. Marcus is my lifesaver. Anyone who dares touch a hair on his head, I'll take their life. The iron gate slammed shut in front of us. I crawled over and held my father-in-law. Isabel, you threw him in the snow today. Tomorrow you'll be begging on your knees for him to live. Still howling like ghosts out there. Pour cold water on him. Wake him up. Isabel's cruel voice came through the yard's loudspeaker. Two bodyguards appeared on the second-floor balcony. Victor. Victor. I suddenly stood up, grabbed a decorative brick from the snow, and smashed it frantically at the smart lock by the front door. I seized the opportunity and rammed my head into a bodyguard's chest, snatching his walkie-talkie and backup phone. I dialed emergency services and hoarsely screamed out the address. Come save someone. The patient has no heartbeat. Hurry. An ambulance screeched to a stop in front of the mansion. Where's the patient? Over here. Please save him. The doctor was about to crouch down to examine him when the mansion door opened again. Isabel walked out with Marcus, her face dark. Who gave you permission to come in? Isabel strode forward and blocked the paramedic. Doctor, check Marcus's hand first. He just had a shock and his finger is bleeding. It needs immediate treatment. The doctor glanced at Marcus's finger with its cartoon band-aid, completely speechless. That elderly gentleman is in cardiac arrest. This is a life or death situation. Sable snorted coldly, glancing dismissively at my father-in-law in the snow. Some country old man. If he dies, he dies. How precious can he be? I'm the young mistress of Sterling Group. I order you to examine Marcus immediately. A deafening roar suddenly came from the night sky. 3 black helicopters bearing the Sterling family crest tore through the wind and snow, circling above the mansion. Marcus, look. The helicopter I called for you is here. Isabel took Marcus's hand and walked proudly toward where the helicopter was landing. Marcus was even more excited. His face flushed. He glanced at me arrogantly. Nathan, see that? This is what wealth looks like. A poor man like you will never experience it in your lifetime. The helicopter landed steadily. The cabin door opened. Team of fully armed, black-clad bodyguards and top medical experts in white coats filed out. Isabel eagerly stepped forward, pointing at Marcus. Thank you all for coming. The patient is. She didn't finish her sentence. My father-in-law's inner pocket. I pulled out the dark jade thumb ring that represented absolute power in the Sterling family. I stood up, facing the helicopter's blinding searchlight. I held the ring up before Isabel's eyes. Isabel, Open your eyes and look carefully at who you just threw out. The blinding beam of the helicopter's searchlight cut through the swirling snow, illuminating the dark jade thumb ring in my trembling, bloodied hand. The emblem, carved into its surface, a coiled dragon swallowing a sword, was unmistakable. It was the absolute seal of the Sterling family, a relic passed down through generations, representing unchecked authority over the multi-billion-dollar empire. Isabel stared at my hand, her perfectly manicured fingers pausing in midair. For a split second, confusion contorted her beautiful, arrogant face. Then she let out a sharp, mocking laugh that barely concealed the uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "Where did you steal that?" she snapped, taking a step toward me, her heels crunching in the snow. "A cheap knockoff from a flea market? You think a piece of stained glass is going to impress my medical team? Security, confiscate that fake and get this lunatic out of my sight." She turned toward the line of elite, black-clad personnel pouring out of the helicopter, expecting them to obey her command. They didn't even look at her. The man leading the charge, a towering, battle-scarred veteran named Commander Vance, the head of the Sterling Group's private elite guard, froze the moment his eyes locked onto the jade ring. The color drained from his weathered face. "Commander Vance," Isabel called out, her voice pitching higher, irritation bleeding into her tone. "I said grab him and get the doctors over to Marcus. His finger is." "Shut your mouth," Vance roared, his voice like a thunderclap cutting through the roar of the rotors. Isabel recoiled as if she had been slapped. "Excuse me? Do you know who you are talking to?" "I am Isabel Sterling, the heir to." Vance didn't even wait for her to finish. He shoved past her with such violent force that Isabel lost her balance, tumbling hard into the snowdrift, her expensive mink coat ruined in an instant. Marcus yelped and tried to catch her, but two elite guards slammed their assault rifles into his chest, sending him crashing onto the freezing pavement. "Stay on the ground, filth," one of the guards hissed. "What are you doing?" Marcus shrieked, clutching his ribs, his arrogance entirely shattered by sudden, brutal violence. "She's the young mistress. I am her head butler. You work for us." Vance ignored them. He lunged forward, dropping to one knee in the blood-stained snow right before me. He didn't look at me. His terrified eyes were fixed on the pale, motionless figure wrapped in my pathetic, snow-covered down jacket. "Chairman," Vance choked out, his hands hovering over Victor's rigid body, terrified to even touch him. He pressed two fingers to Victor's icy neck. A second later, Vance turned back toward the medical team, his face twisted in pure panic. "Code red. It's the chairman. Cardiac arrest. Move, goddammit. Move." The team of white-coated medical experts, who had been briskly walking toward the mansion, suddenly broke into a frantic sprint. They shoved past the local paramedics I had called earlier, falling upon Victor with military precision. From the snowbank, Isabel let out a breathless, trembling scoff. "Chairman? Vance, are you insane? That's Nathan's deadbeat father. My father is in Geneva. I spoke to his secretary yesterday. I didn't look at her. I couldn't. All my attention was on the lead cardiologist, Dr. Eris, who ripped open Victor's frozen shirt. No pulse. Core temperature is dropping rapidly. Fibrillation is evident, Dr. Eris barked, pulling out a portable defibrillator from a shockproof case. Charging to 200. Clear. Victor's frail body arched violently off the cold ground as the electric shock tore through him. He slumped back. Dead weight. Nothing. Charge to 300. Push 1 milligram of epinephrine. Dr. Eris screamed. Isabel had crawled to her feet. The absolute conviction in Vance's voice, the sheer terror in the doctor's movements. It was finally piercing through her veil of absolute narcissism. She stumbled forward, pushing past a guard, and finally looked down at the old man lying on the frozen pavement. The local paramedics had wiped away the frost and dirt from the old man's face to attach the oxygen mask. The pale, purple-tinged skin, the distinct, sharp jawline, the silver hair, and the faint surgical scar near the collarbone from his recent bypass surgery. Isabel's breath hitched. Her pupils dilated so wide her eyes looked entirely black. "No," she whispered, the word barely escaping her throat. Her legs gave out completely, and she collapsed to her knees, the sharp ice cutting into her bare skin. "No, no, no. That's not possible." "Clear," Dr. Eris yelled. Thump. Victor's body seized again. "We have a rhythm," a nurse shouted. "It's weak, thready, but it's there. We need to airlift him to the ICU right now or he won't make it the hour." "Prep the stretcher," Vance roared. "Move him." As the medics carefully hoisted Victor onto the mobile intensive care stretcher, Isabel tried to crawl toward him, her hands reaching out in desperation. "Dad. Dad. Oh my God, Dad." Vance stepped in front of her, a wall of pure muscle and fury. He looked down at the heiress of his employer with absolute disgust. Get out of the way, Miss Sterling, Vance said, his voice laced with venom. That's my father. She screamed, tears streaming down her face, her perfect makeup ruined, running in black streaks down her pale cheeks. Let me go with him. I need to be in the helicopter. Dad. I slowly stood up. My knees screamed in pain from kneeling on the ice, and the back of my hand, where Marcus had ground his shoe into my flesh, throbbed with a sickening heat. I walked over to Isabel. She looked up at me, her eyes wide, begging for the first time in the 3 years of our marriage. Nathan, tell them, she sobbed, grabbing the hem of my pants. Tell them to let me on the chopper. He's my father. I looked down at her. The woman I had loved. The woman I had tolerated countless humiliations for, hoping to honor the secret promise I made to Victor when he entrusted her to me. An hour ago, I said, my voice eerily calm, cutting through the howling wind. I begged you. I told you who he was. I told you he was dying. I pounded on that glass door until my hands bled. And what did you say? Isabel choked, violently shaking her head, trying to erase the memory of her own words. You said, I continued, leaning down so only she could hear. Throw these two paupers into the snow. Don't let their poverty stink up my carpet. I didn't know, she shrieked, clawing at my legs. Nathan, I didn't know. It was Marcus. Marcus told me it was your father. He lied to me. Marcus, who was pinned to the ground nearby, went rigid. The terror of what he had done, what he had orchestrated, was finally crushing the air out of his lungs. I didn't. Miss Sterling, you said you didn't care who it was. You told me to teach them a lesson. I was just following your household rules. You fed my father-in-law dog food, I said, my voice echoing loudly in the quiet yard, carrying to every single elite guard and medic present. The entire courtyard went dead silent. The wind seemed to stop. Vance slowly turned his head, his eyes locking onto Marcus. The murderous intent radiating from the commander was so heavy it felt suffocating. What? Vance whispered. He pressed him to the floor, I said, pointing a bloody finger at Marcus, who was now weeping, and forced his face into a bowl of dog food. Then when Victor was having a heart attack, Marcus took his emergency medication and poured it into the trash can, while Isabel watched. Vance drew his sidearm. The metallic schlick of the safety clicking off sounded louder than a bomb. He aimed it directly at the space between Marcus's eyes. No. Please, Marcus screamed, a dark stain rapidly spreading across his tailored trousers as his bladder let go. Don't shoot. I'm sorry. I'll do anything. Commander, I said, raising my hand, the jade ring catching the searchlight. Once more. Stand down. Vance's jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth would shatter. He looked at the ring, then slowly lowered the weapon, holstering it. Your orders, sir. Lock down the estate, I commanded, my voice cold, devoid of any the weakness I had shown for the past 3 years. No one leaves. Not the bodyguards who dragged us out here. Not the maids who watched and laughed. Not him. And definitely not her. Nathan, please. Isabel wailed, grabbing my ankles. You can't do this to me. I'm his daughter. I'm your wife. I kicked her off me with a swift, merciless thrust of my boot. She tumbled backward into the snow, gasping. You stopped being his daughter the moment you threw him into the cold to die. For a butler's bruised ego, I said. And you stopped being my wife a long time ago. I turned and walked toward the helicopter. As I stepped aboard, I looked down at the 2 miserable figures huddled in the freezing storm. Keep them in the courtyard, I told Vance. No coats. No heat. Let them experience exactly what they gave him. If they freeze, they freeze. Cockroaches are tough, right? Understood, sir, Vance said, a cruel, satisfied smile touching his lips. The helicopter door slid shut, sealing out Isabel's hysterical screams. The aircraft lifted off, leaving the sprawling mansion shrinking below us, engulfed in the unforgiving blizzard. 3 days later, the intensive care unit, Mount Sinai. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound in the sterile VIP suite. I sat in the leather chair beside the bed, staring at the old man lying beneath the crisp white sheets. Tubes snaked out from his arms and chest, keeping the great Victor Sterling tethered to the mortal realm. For 48 hours, it had been a coin toss. Severe hypothermia combined with acute myocardial infarction. Any normal man would have died in that snowbank. But Victor was not a normal man. He was a titan who had built an empire from the blood and ash of the financial underworld. His willpower was terrifying. On the 3rd morning, his finger twitched. Then his eyelids fluttered heavy and slow. I leaned forward. Victor. His pale, dry lips parted. It took him a full minute to open his eyes, the hazy fog of medication clearing to reveal the sharp, predatory amber irises that had terrified boardrooms for decades. He looked at me, then down at his own body, then out the window at the gray sky. I survived, he rasped, his voice sounding like two stones grinding together. Barely, I said, pouring a small cup of warm water and bringing a sponge swab to his cracked lips. You were dead for 2 minutes in the snow. Victor let out a weak, rattling chuckle that devolved into a harsh cough. Death didn't want me. Thinks I'm too much trouble. He fell back against the pillows, catching his breath. He looked at the jade ring still sitting on my finger. You used it, he said. I had no choice. You were dying. The local ambulance was blocked by your daughter. She demanded they treat Marcus's paper cut first. At the mention of Isabel's name, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. The frail, dying old man vanished, replaced instantly by the ruthless patriarch. His hands clenched into weak fists. I wanted to test her, Victor whispered, staring at the ceiling. I knew she was vain. I knew she was spoiled. But I wanted to believe. I wanted to believe that somewhere beneath the designer clothes and the arrogance, there was a shred of her mother's kindness. That's why I dressed in those rags. That's why I came through the servant's entrance. I wanted to see how the house operated when the king wasn't watching. You almost got yourself killed for a test, I said softly. It was necessary, Victor replied, turning his hard eyes to me. I was going to step down next month, Nathan. I was going to hand the entire Sterling group to her with you as her shadow, her anchor. But what I saw, what I experienced. He closed his eyes, a tear escaping the corner and tracking through his deep wrinkles. The memory of the cold floor, the dog food, the boot on his neck. The sheer indignity. She watched him throw away my medicine, Victor said, his voice trembling with a terrifying, quiet rage. She laughed. She ordered me thrown into the snow. She didn't know it was you. I offered, though I knew it was no defense. It doesn't matter. Victor suddenly roared, his heart monitor spiking violently. He grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. It doesn't matter if it was me, or your father, or a nameless beggar off the street. No human being treats another like that. She is rotten, Nathan. Rotten to the core. A parasite. Wearing my name. He let go, panting heavily, the machines buzzing in alarm until a nurse rushed. Victor waved her off with a furious flick of his wrist. Call my lawyers, Victor commanded, his eyes burning with hellfire. Call the board of directors. Call the police. It's time to clean house. Day 5. The Sterling Mansion. The snow had melted, leaving behind a dreary, gray slush that matched the mood hanging over the estate. For 5 days, the mansion had been under military lockdown by Vance's elite guard. The household staff, who had previously strutted around like minor royalty under Isabel's protection, were now huddled in the grand foyer like frightened sheep. The heavy oak doors swung open. I pushed Victor's wheelchair over the threshold. He was dressed in a pristine, charcoal bespoke suit, a thick cashmere blanket draped over his lap, an oxygen tank affixed to the back of his chair with a nasal cannula providing him a steady flow of air. He looked thin, frail, but his presence was entirely suffocating. The moment the staff saw him, several maids burst into tears and dropped to their knees. The bodyguards who had pinned me down 5 days ago immediately prostrated themselves on the marble floor, shaking violently. Chairman. One of them whimpered. We didn't know. We were just following orders. Victor didn't even look at them. I rolled him into the center of the living room, the exact spot where he had been forced to the floor. Where are they? Victor asked quietly. Vance stepped out from the shadows of the hallway. In the basement holding cells, sir. They spent the first night in the courtyard as Mr. Mitchell ordered. We moved them inside before they got severe frostbite, but they've been kept in isolation ever since. Bring them up. A few minutes later, the sound of dragging footsteps echoed from the stairs. Isabel was unrecognizable. The glamorous, haughty heiress who spent millions on her appearance looked like a feral animal. Her hair was matted and greasy, her designer dress torn and stained with filth. Her lips were cracked, her eyes sunken with dark, bruised circles. Marcus was worse. He walked with a limp, shivering uncontrollably, his face sallow and unshaven. The arrogance that had fueled him when he ground his shoe into my hand was completely gone. He looked like exactly what he was. A pathetic, cruel little man stripped of his borrowed power. They were shoved into the living room, falling to the floor. Isabel slowly lifted her head. When she saw Victor sitting in the wheelchair, alive, a pathetic, desperate wail tore from her throat. She scrambled forward on her hands and knees, tears carving clean lines through the dirt on her face. Dad. Dad, oh my God, you're alive. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, she shrieked, reaching for his knees. Vance stepped forward and slammed the butt of his rifle into the floor. A fraction of an inch from her fingers. Isabel flinched and recoiled, sobbing hysterically. "Do not touch me," Victor said. His voice was no longer loud. It was a cold, absolute whisper. "You have lost the right to address me by that title. Dad, please. It was a mistake. I didn't recognize you. I swear if I knew it was you, I never would have." "If you knew it was me?" Victor interrupted, leaning forward slightly. "So your defense is that you thought you were murdering Nathan's father? You thought you were murdering an innocent, impoverished old man who had come to visit his son?" Isabel choked, her mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. She looked up at me, desperation in her eyes. Nathan, tell him I was just stressed. The company, the pressures. Marcus manipulated me." Marcus's head snapped up. "What? You lying bitch. You're the one who said you hated the sight of poor people. You told me to handle them. You fed him dog food, you psycho." Isabel screamed, lunging at Marcus and clawing at his face. "You threw away his medicine. You tried to kill my father." Marcus shoved her back violently, sending her sprawling across the marble floor. "I did it for you. You laughed when I told you I threw him out. You rewarded me. Chairman Sterling, sir, please. I'm just a servant. She gave me the authority. I had to obey the young mistress." "Enough," Victor commanded. The room fell dead silent save for Isabel's pathetic hyperventilating. "The security cameras," Victor said, looking at me. I pulled a remote from my pocket and pointed it at the massive 100-inch television mounted on the wall. Isabel had thought she was clever having Marcus delete the security footage from the server room, but she didn't know that my background, the real reason Victor had arranged my marriage to her, wasn't farming. I was one of the premier cybersecurity architects in the country. The useless freeloader she despised had built the Sterling Group's entire encrypted network from scratch. I had a mirror backup of every camera in this house feeding directly to an offshore server. The screen flickered to life. The high-definition footage was crystal clear. There was Marcus, standing over Victor, shoving the bowl of dog food into his face, sneering with absolute disdain. There was me, bursting through the door, knocking the bowl away. Then the audio kicked in, clear as a bell. I was just teaching this old country bumpkin some manners. Letting him eat dog food is already doing him a huge favor. The video skipped forward. Marcus holding the bottle of pills. Oop, my hand slipped. "You country people are tough. You can survive a night in the cold, right?" The pills tumbling into the trash can. Then Isabel's grand entrance. Her laughing with Marcus. Her staring out the frosted glass, listening to my desperate pleas for Victor's life. "Throw these two paupers into the snow outside. Don't let their poverty stink up my carpet." Isabel clamped her hands over her ears, burying her face in the floor, screaming in denial. Marcus was curled into a fetal position, rocking back and forth, knowing his life was effectively over. Victor stared at the screen, his face a mask of absolute stone. He didn't blink. He just watched the reality of his daughter's soul laid bare. When the video ended, I turned off the screen. "Marcus, no," Victor said quietly. Marcus jerked as if he had been shot. He scrambled onto his knees, bowing repeatedly, slamming his forehead against the marble floor until it bled. "Mercy, Chairman. Mercy. I was blinded. I was stupid. Please, I'll disappear. You'll never see me again." "You are correct. I will never see you again," Victor said. He snapped his fingers. Two men in sharp suits stepped into the room from the hallway. They weren't Vance's men. They were detectives from the Capitol Police Department. "Marcus Snow," the lead detective said, pulling out a pair of heavy steel handcuffs. "You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Victor Sterling. Assault, unlawful imprisonment, and reckless endangerment. We have the video evidence, and we have your fingerprints on the medicine bottle we retrieved from the trash." Marcus tried to run. He pushed himself up and bolted for the back door, but Vance's guards grabbed him effortlessly, slamming him face first into the mahogany dining table. His nose shattered with a sickening crunch. He wailed in agony as the detectives hauled his hands behind his back and ratcheted the cuffs down tight. As they dragged Marcus toward the door, I stepped in his path. I held up a large silver bowl, the same one he had used 5 days ago. It was filled to the brim with wet, pungent dog food. Marcus looked at the bowl, then up at me, blood pouring from his nose. "Before you go to prison for the rest of your life," I said softly, my voice devoid of mercy, "eat." Marcus stared at me in horror. "What? You said it yourself. This food costs more than anything I've eaten in my life. Don't be ungrateful." I looked at the detectives. They conveniently looked the other way, staring fascinated at the ceiling molding. "Eat it," Vance barked, stepping up behind him, pressing a heavy hand onto the back of Marcus's neck. Weeping in humiliation and terror, Marcus lowered his face. With his hands cuffed behind his back, he had to eat like a dog. He bit into the foul-smelling slop, choking, gagging, tears and blood mixing into the bowl. Every bite he forced down was a destruction of his ego, a total dismantling of the cruel tyrant he had pretended to be. When he threw up, Vance hauled him backward. "Get this garbage out of my sight," Vance ordered. The detectives dragged the sobbing, vomiting Marcus out the front door. Then there was only Isabel. She slowly pushed herself up into a sitting position. She looked around the room, at the trembling staff, at Vance's cold, dead eyes, at my indifferent face, and finally at her father. "Dad," she whispered, a broken, hollow sound. "He's gone. Marcus is gone. It's just us now. Family. I'll go to rehab. I'll go to therapy. I'll be the daughter you wanted. Just, please don't hate me." Victor sighed, a deep, tired sound of an old man who had nothing left to lose. "Mr. Higgins," Victor called out. The family lawyer, a stern man with silver-rimmed glasses, walked into the room, carrying a thick leather briefcase. He opened it and produced a stack of documents. "Isabel," Victor said, his voice flat. "As of 9 a.m. this morning, the board of directors of the Sterling Group convened an emergency meeting. I presented them with the evidence of your extreme negligence, your relationship with the butler, and your gross moral turpitude. By unanimous vote, you have been stripped of your title as executive vice president." Isabel's eyes widened. "What? That? No. You can't. My shares, my trust fund." "Your trust fund was tied to a morality clause. A clause you violated when you engaged in a publicized affair with an employee and attempted to murder the chairman of the board," Higgins stated coldly. "The trust is dissolved. Your shares have been legally recalled by the founder." "I have nothing," Isabel whispered, the reality of her new existence crashing down on her like a physical weight. "I'm a Sterling. You can't leave me with nothing." "You are no longer a Sterling," Victor said. He gestured to Higgins, who placed a final document on the coffee table in front of her. "These are your divorce papers prepared by Mr. Mitchell," Higgins said. "Given the video evidence of adultery and abuse, the prenuptial agreement stands. You leave this marriage with exactly what you brought into it. The clothes on your back." Isabel stared at the divorce papers. She looked at me, a flicker of her old, venomous arrogance flaring to life. "You planned this. You set me up. You pathetic, scheming little rat. You wanted the company for yourself. You manipulated my father into disowning me." I walked over to the coffee table and picked up a pen, holding it out to her. "I didn't have to plan anything, Isabel," I said calmly. "All I did was ask you to open a door. You chose to keep it locked. Sign the papers." "And if I don't?" she spat. "If you don't," Victor intervened, his voice dripping with menace, "I will hand the security footage over to the district attorney. Marcus will happily testify that you ordered the hit on me to secure a lighter sentence for himself. You can either walk out of that front door penniless, or you can leave in handcuffs and spend the next 20 years in a federal penitentiary." The fight drained out of her entirely. She looked at the pen in my hand as if it were a venomous snake. With trembling fingers, she took it. She signed the papers, her tears smudging the blue ink. When she finished, she dropped the pen and looked at me. "Where am I supposed to go? My credit cards are frozen. I don't have a car. I don't even have a coat." "It's a big world out there, Isabel," I said, stepping back. "I hear the countryside is nice this time of year. Maybe you can learn to farm." "Guards," Vance said, stepping forward. "Escort the trespasser off the property." Two massive guards hoisted Isabel to her feet by her armpits. She didn't struggle. She was completely broken, her mind unable to process the absolute totality of her ruin. They marched her toward the front door, dragging her across the thick Persian carpet she loved so much. Before they threw her out, she looked back one last time. She saw me standing beside Victor's wheelchair, the powerful patriarch and the son-in-law she had despised. Then, the heavy oak doors slammed shut, sealing her out in the cold. 6 months later, the view from the top floor of the Sterling Tower was breathtaking. The entire capital city sprawled out below like a circuit board of glowing lights, pulsing with life and power. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, adjusting the cuffs of my tailored midnight blue suit. The dark jade thumb ring rested securely on my right hand, heavy and familiar. "Mr. Chairman," a voice called out behind me. I turned. Commander Vance stood at attention by the door, a secure tablet in his hand. "Report, Vance," I said, walking over to the massive mahogany desk. "The acquisition of the rival tech firm was finalized this morning, sir. Our shares are up 12%. The transition has been completely seamless." Vance paused, his stoic face softening just a fraction. And the former chairman sends his regards from the Bahamas. His doctors say the sea air is doing wonders for his heart. I smiled. Victor had survived, but he had chosen peace. After the purge of the household, he realized he had spent his entire life building a prison of gold. He officially adopted me, transferred his entire 60% stake in the empire to my name, and retired to a private island, leaving me to wield the sword he had forged. Good. Send him a crate of that vintage scotch he likes. Just don't let his doctors know, I said. Understood, sir. Vance hesitated for a moment, looking at the tablet. There is one other matter. A minor security flag from the downtown shelter initiative we fund. I raised an eyebrow. What is it? Vance tapped the screen and placed the tablet on my desk. The facial recognition software at the St. Jude Soup Kitchen triggered a match. I thought, you might want to know. I looked down at the tablet. It was a grainy snapshot from a security camera in a crowded, dimly lit cafeteria line. A woman was standing in the queue, wrapped in a filthy, oversized gray coat that looked like it had been pulled from a dumpster. Her hair was chopped short, uneven and dull. Her face was gaunt, hollowed out by months of sleeping rough and surviving on scraps. She was clutching a plastic bowl with white-knuckled desperation, staring blankly ahead at the vats of cheap stew. It was Isabel. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. The woman who had worn million-dollar diamonds, who had ordered men thrown into the freezing snow for dirtying her carpet, was now waiting in line for a bowl of watery soup to keep from starving to death. Do you want me to have the shelter manager offer her any special assistance, sir? Vance asked quietly. I reached out and turned off the tablet screen, the image fading to black. I walked back to the window, looking out over the glittering empire I now controlled. The city was beautiful, but it was cold. It only respected those who survived the winter. No, Vance, I said softly, my voice devoid of pity, revenge, or anger. It was just the absolute truth. Treat her like everyone else. Let her learn how to survive. I turned my back on the window and walked toward the boardroom doors. The past was dead, buried in the snow. It was time to build the future.